Hello, liebe Leute, and welcome back to the conversation. We have finally reached episode 5, and the reason I say finally is because, boy, has it been chaos the last 2 weeks on our end. As you probably know, none of us that work on this project are full-time YouTubers. We all have full-time jobs outside of this project, and for the last 2 weeks, it has been brutal trying to find time that we're all together and have the weather cooperate. Well, the weather is not cooperating here in Germany at the moment, and as you can see, it's rather late in the evening on a Sunday, and I just can't go another day without this being filmed, so here we are in my living room, and we are filming it. Before I get started on episode 5, I want to go back to episode 4 for just a second, because at the end of that episode, there was something that happened that kind of got to me over the last few days in a good way. And it just kept going round and round in my head, and I had to think it through. Am I the only one that noticed that when Simon acknowledged that Wilhelm said that he liked him, that Wilhelm was interested in Simon, and Simon said, it's okay. It's okay that you like me. That almost sounded to me like Simon was giving Wilhelm permission to be gay or to be bisexual, whatever it is. But he validated Wilhelm's feelings and said to him, it's okay. It's okay. And you can see the relief in Wilhelm's face. And I'm wondering if this is the first time in his life where someone has actually directly to his face said, man, it's okay. And so I'd share your thoughts on that. Something that just popped out at me. There it is. So moving into this episode, we kind of pick up where we left off, where they're still in bed together. And, in the last episode, in the last review that we made, we talked about security a little bit. Did security know what was going on? And, did Wilhelm and Simon sneak in the window at night? Or is it possible that the guards were not on duty that late at night, and so they just came into the main hallway? But it seems to Wilhelm, at least, that the guards don't know what's happening. Now, I think that's perhaps naive, but he says to Simon as he's getting dressed to leave, to go to breakfast and then on to class, he says, wait until me and the bodyguards or the security are downstairs, then you can come out of the room, and make sure you come to the school from the bus stop so, nobody thinks you were here overnight. And the way he says this, the way he expresses it, makes me believe that Wilhelm believes that security doesn't know. Oh, I'm still going to fall on the side that, yes, I think security knows exactly what's going on, because even us as viewers, we see these two young men, these actors on screen, and even we can see the passion between them. We can see the fact that even off screen, they genuinely like each other. Do you really think security, who are paid professionals at reading body language and watching people, do you really think they didn't notice? So I am completely on the side of, yes, they noticed. And if they didn't know before, when these two young men are down by the lake and they're very much in each other's personal space, again, security knows exactly what's going on, and they choose, not to address it. Why would they address it? I mean, to an extent, they have to give Wilhelm his space to grow up and be a young man. Take that one step further. If security is paying attention, as I believe they are, I wonder what reporting responsibilities does security have to the Queen? Are they telling her what goes on with her son on a daily basis, the important events? Does she call them to get updates? Because I have to think at some point, when the Queen has heard that Wilhelm is hanging out with Simon, that they were in bed together, or that Wilhelm went to Simon's house for dinner, the Queen's got to hear the name Simon more than once, and after a while, she's not stupid. She's going to connect the dots. Now, I have said previously, it's my opinion, that the Queen already knows. She knows her son. She knows what his predilections are, what his preferences are. Maybe not in detail, but in generalities, because most mothers do know. So again, I think she's going to connect the dots rather quickly. One thing that is slightly off topic here that I'd like to point out, don't know if you've noticed, but I like to wear sweaters, and I've started my own collection. I have been collecting sweaters from the Netherlands, Denmark, different places in Germany, I hope to get one from Austria in a couple weeks when I'm down in Innsbruck. I noticed Wilhelm's sweater in this episode, and I just want to say I really like this. So shout out to the costume director, whoever chose this sweater for the scene, because I really do like this sweater. Completely off topic. In the last review, I really got taken to task for claiming that Simon is a hypocrite for treating the father the way he does with the alcohol and drugs and, oh, you ruined our lives, versus Wilhelm, which he completely gives a pass to and turns a blind eye to. And I stand firm on what I said previously. I think there was much more to the father's story than what we're being given. Because if this man chose drugs and alcohol, as we're led to believe, over his children, then why is it in virtually every episode the father is trying to get into the lives of his children? He's trying to connect with them. And we don't actually know what the problem was, because if this man has legitimate back problems or legitimate health issues that require medication, is that choosing medication? I'm just not convinced, because I personally, for those of you who know my story, I know that there's more than one side to every story. There's your side, my side, and generally the truth is somewhere in the middle. So I think there's more to the father's story. But having said that, what then gives Simon the idea that he can give Wilhelm a pass? And I think I might have an answer. I might have a clue. The morning after this incident where Simon and Wilhelm wake up and they're in the bed together, Wilhelm says to Simon, "Thank you for rescuing me." And then Simon smiles, "You're welcome." I wonder if the difference is that Simon sees Wilhelm as someone he can save, as someone who can be redeemed, whereas he's already written off his own father. I'm wondering that. I think in season 3, we're going to get more of a backstory on the father. I don't know why I feel that. I just feel that there's so much more there, and there's things that the writers can do with that to add, new dimensions to Sarah's story, Simon's story, and Linda's story. And quite frankly, I'd like to see it played out. I love a good redemption story. Again, I don't want to drag my own life into this, but for those of you who know my history, I feel like my life ended up in a very good place after a lot of turmoil and a lot of hard work. And I would like to see that with, the father here. I would like to see that. We'll see. I want to make one other observation about the scene where Wilhelm and Simon are still in bed together. And I'm not sure what I want to say about it, because I have my own views on religion. But am I the only one that noticed that Wilhelm is wearing a cross around his neck, and as he's making love to Simon, this symbol of Christianity is literally plastered between the bare chests of two young men making love? I wonder if that was a statement by the writers or the director. I wonder if it's a reflection of the Swedish attitude toward religion, where they have the tradition of Christianity, but it's not what I would consider a conservative Christian sect or version in Sweden, not like we're starting to see in the United States, more like the German version, where people go to church and pray out of tradition and not much more than that. I'm curious about that. I thought it was a rather clever thing for the director to do, or the screenwriters. I'm not sure who should get credit for that. So let's talk about the classroom for a moment, because something jumped out at me here. Have you noticed that Simon and Sarah always sit in the table in the center of the room together, always, and that it's Wilhelm who seems to move around the classroom? I think there's only a few instances where in back-to-back episodes, Wilhelm was sitting in the same seat, but often he's sitting in various tables, always within sight of Simon. He's always in a place or a position where he can watch Simon, but he moves around, and he doesn't always have the same person sitting next to him. I don't think there's any point to that, other than I just think it's interesting. I also think it's interesting in this particular scene that Sarah tells Simon to get his elbows off the table, and yet behind them, the table off to the side, you can see a young man with his elbows on the table. She doesn't say anything to him. I think that may be because she can tell Simon to get his elbows off the table. She's not very likely to do that to another student. But this is one more indication that Sarah wants to be of a better class, just like when she corrected her mother for the way she ate spaghetti when they were at home, and she needs to sit up straight when she's at the dinner table. Sarah clearly wants to be part of this upper class. She wants to see herself in that group. And I'd be hard-pressed not to address the issue where she says to Simon, hey, you weren't home last night. Where were you? You didn't sleep at home. And then Simon stutteringly tries to give an answer, and you can see on Sarah's face that she's not buying it. Now, I asked in a previous episode, is it just that everyone in this school is blind and doesn't see what's going on between Simon and Wilhelm? But, okay, at least a couple people do, and Sarah probably is at the front of that list. Later on in this episode, we see that Wilhelm is called over to the picnic table to have this group meeting where he learns some pretty bad news. The bad news is that Alexander was caught with drugs while entering the school, and he's now been suspended, and I don't know, he's like on some sort of house arrest. And he's not in communication with the group, but the group now knows that they're being threatened, because if Alexander decides to tell the headmistress or the police or anybody else that he brought drugs to this particular party, a whole lot of, quite a few young men are in a whole lot of trouble. He hasn't talked yet, and August says, don't worry, I'm going to be able to get a message to him. I'm going to be able to talk to him and just keep his mouth shut, but we have a crisis on our hands and we need to find a solution. I find this picnic table to be extremely important because, in my opinion, this sets the scene for the first time that Wilhelm is going to have to engage in politics. And this may mark the first time that Wilhelm exercises his political skill. I'll explain why in just a moment. Before I talk about this political awakening, I want to talk about the moment when Wilhelm calls Simon aside. They go into a classroom and Wilhelm directly asks Simon, is it true that you provided drugs to these other people, to August and the others? And then he makes the comment that dealing drugs is so low. I find that fascinating, coming from the person who had no problem consuming those drugs. Obviously, I find that very hypocritical. Of course, it was very important for Wilhelm to talk to Simon about this, because Simon then explains, well, it's the only way I could get August to pay me back the money he owes me. Oh, what does he owe you money for? Well, I supplied him alcohol for your initiation party. So Wilhelm finds out that Simon is not lily white. He's been stealing drugs and providing them to the group, and he's been procuring alcohol illegally and, of course, providing it to minors. Interesting that in both cases, Wilhelm was a consumer. But I totally get Simon's perspective here when it seems like the only thing Wilhelm is concerned about at the moment is his own reputation or the reputation of his family, as though Simon's reputation or his family's reputation is less important or meaningless. That is clearly unfair. And I agree that Simon shouldn't have to take the brunt of that when there's shared culpability. And I think he's right to feel wounded. And in the same scene, Wilhelm explains to Simon that the group, this secret society, wants to blame you, Simon, for bringing the drugs in and thereby spraying Alexander out. Clearly, that's not what Wilhelm wants to do, and Simon doesn't want to stand there and discuss it. He kind of gets angry and walks off, and understandable. But looking at this objectively, it makes no sense to blame Simon in order to spring Alex, because Alexander was caught in possession of the drugs, sneaking back into the school after hours, if there's a curfew. I don't know that there is. Nothing you say about Simon is going to change the fact that Alexander was caught in possession of these drugs. That's not going to change. And so by dragging Simon into it, you're just making this thing messier for everybody. And of course, the more defendants you bring into a case, the more likely it is one of them is going to squeal in order to save themselves and tell on everybody. So really, this is just not a clever solution on the part of August and the group. So Wilhelm, being Wilhelm, he finds out that August is out of money. That's why he can't pay Simon back for this alcohol. And he does his own little digging. Before he takes action, he does his research. He does his homework. Kudos. Because that's what a professional politician is going to do. Not run off at the mouth, not run out there and try to take some kind of action before you get all the facts. That's what Wilhelm does. He calls the court and he says, the royal court, and he says, I need you to do some digging on August. And he finds a solution, because that's what a good politician does. Instead of undermining August or trying to cut him out of the picture altogether, he's trying to find a solution that helps August and puts him in the pocket. Because obviously if Wilhelm helps August, August owes Wilhelm. It's good politics. And so the secret society meets again to discuss what they're going to do with this situation with Alexander and the drugs. And August says, okay, well, what we've decided and what we're going to do is we're going to blame all this on Simon and get Alexander sprung. But Wilhelm says, well, actually, no, that's not what we're going to do. What we're going to do is we're going to blame Alexander. And August says, well, I'm the one in charge of this group. You just got into this group, so who are you to, have an opinion, blah, 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 blah. And Wilhelm, in one swoop, takes full control of that room. Doesn't raise his voice, doesn't get angry, doesn't scream and shout or throw anything, but simply says, you won't even be here after the Christmas break because you're broke. So this doesn't affect you in the slightest. It makes more sense to blame Alexander, because the worst that's going to happen to him is he's going to get sent to a school in Switzerland. He's no worse for the wear. It's sloppy if we go after Simon. And we're going to do this. This is what we're going to do. Is there anyone else in this room that disagrees with me? And of course, as we know, history tells us that everyone in the room followed behind Wilhelm, and they were, surprised, obviously, that August was without money and was losing influence. But the important thing here is the alpha dog barked and the beta dog laid down. Now, we're going to see a whole lot more of that in a future episode, but this is the moment that Wilhelm became a politician and was effective at it. So obviously, one by one, they all go and tell the headmistress, hey, it was Alexander. He did this. He offered drugs. We didn't want any part of it. And thereby, they didn't drag anybody else into it. They kept it neat. And by all these people pointing the finger at one person, I'm going to be honest, it's a good defense strategy. No secret that Felice is one of my favorite characters, and I love her story arc. And I love the fact that she is making such efforts to be friends with Sarah, because Sarah strikes her as such a genuine person. And it has absolutely nothing to do with Sarah's status, the status of her family, or her money, because her family doesn't have any of those things. So this is, on the part of Felice, pure friendship. So she invites Sarah over for a sleepover at the school, and they all play dress up, they have fun together. And it's at one point, Felice's mother sends a package to Felice containing this dress that her mother wore for St. Lucia. Now, I'm going to be honest, I didn't know anything about Santa Lucia. I didn't know anything about the customs or traditions, but I did take some time to watch videos. Whole nother subject. But the point is, Felice she's pleased that her mother's taking such an interest in her life, but you can see that in the same respect, she's not pleased. And then she says, everything for my mother always has to be perfect. You have to lose weight. You have to own the right things so that people won't bully you. And when I heard those things, I kind of got a little angry. When I watched this episode for the purpose of taking notes, Gus was sitting with me, and I actually looked over at him and I said, you know what? I think I'm kind of pissed, because I'm not sure if those are things that were said to Felice's mother when she was a child and she now believes those things, or if those things were said to Felice. Because if the idea is that you have to lose weight to be beautiful, yeah, I kind of find that offensive. And this idea that you have to own the right things to keep from being bullied, well, who was bullying who? Was Felice's mother being bullied, or was Felice being bullied? Because if Felice was being bullied, I'm going to get angry. I don't know who I'm going to get angry at, but I'm going to be angry. I want to come to Felice's defense. So it's kind of sad that all her life thus far, the shadow of Felice's mother is just hanging right over her. And interesting that when Felice was nominated or elected to represent Santa Lucia in this festival that they have at the school, Sarah says, well, oh my gosh, I didn't even know that we had to put our names in for this election or for this voting. And Felice says, oh my goodness, I'm sorry, I totally forgot. I didn't even think to tell you. Now, the reason I think that is because it's just not so important to Felice. I don't think Felice feels this need to be popular or to have the best of everything. I don't think that's Felice. But it is for Sarah. It's very important for Sarah. And so in a huge act of kindness, and what a gracious move, Felice allows Sarah to represent Santa Lucia in this festival. And boy, if that doesn't just make Sarah's day. I just thought that was so kind of Felice. Absolutely loved it. Now, again, not knowing anything about Santa Lucia, I want to say one thing. When she came into the room, when Sarah was wearing those candles on her head when she was coming into this main room, I actually got to thinking about what happens if the wax from those candles lands on her scalp. And I actually went online to look to see if there's like some kind of protective covering on the head or something to protect from wax. And I couldn't find one. True, a lot of the young folks today are using electric candles on their heads, battery operated, but some are still using actual candles. And my goodness, I don't see wax protectors. Now, when they hold the candles, I see the paper protectors, but when it's on the scalp, I don't see one. Man, does that seem dangerous to me. And just to say one other thing about the Santa Lucia, again, the father shows up. Now, how he found out about her being Santa Lucia, I'm not sure about that. I didn't really get a strong indication unless maybe Seaman said something about it to him. I don't have any direct evidence of that. But the father shows up to tell his daughter how beautiful she is and to support her and try to make the connection. And again, this is not a man who abandoned his family or doesn't take them seriously. Yes, he does. He most certainly does. Okay, but I don't want to beat a dead horse. By the way, on the night that everybody got dressed up, the young ladies got dressed up and they went to dinner with all their makeup and their fancy dresses, and you see joy on Sarah's face. She very clearly feels like this is the group she belongs with, and she very clearly is happy being in that group. And interesting that when they're all sitting around the table and they bow their heads to pray, she's the one who kept her eyes open and looked around the room just soaking it in. It reminded me of that first episode when Wilhelm made his first dinner with the group at the table, and while they were praying, he was the one with his eyes open looking around. No way to get around the scene where Wilhelm makes a visit to Simon's home for the first time. When I saw this series for the first time about a year ago, this is the scene of all of them from the entire first season. This is the scene that stuck in my head the most and the longest. I really got to thinking about or wondering about how many times in Wilhelm's life has he been to private homes as a child? When, as a prince of the royal family, the son of the reigning queen, how often did he go to other people's homes for birthday parties when they were children? Or, Easter egg hunts or, whatever customs school children have in Sweden. How often did he do that? And if he did that, and I'm sure that he did with certain elite or wealthy families, how often did he ever do that in the home of a commoner? And I'm going to bet probably good money that he's never done that with a commoner. This is the first time he's ever been in someone's private home, and certainly a small, cozy home like this. A couple things I want to think about. The first is, what does security do? I don't think that Wilhelm is so important that, with the President of the United States, I don't think Secret Service shows up 3 days in advance and they check the food in the house to make sure it's not poisoned, and they check the suppliers of the food to make sure that it's not poisoned, and to check the home for listening devices or weapons. I don't think they did any of that. I'm going to bet that they simply rolled up that day in the car with Wilhelm, and it was their first time in the house, just as it was with him. And if we freeze this frame for just a moment, look at the back at Malin, she is clearly smiling. She is clearly enjoying the idea that Wilhelm is socializing and interacting with this family. I think she's very pleased with this. I don't think you can protect someone this closely, spend this much time watching someone grow up and not become somewhat fond of him. And from all we see, Wilhelm is a likable young man. And so I can imagine that security, they're kind of rooting for him. I do think it's lovely that Wilhelm is so kind to Linda when she welcomes him into the home. He's very respectful, and he seems to be looking around, taking in his surroundings. Let's look at it now from Linda's point of view. Your openly gay son has invited the prince, at this point, the crown prince of Sweden, to a house for dinner. What does a mother think? Is my son really interested? Does he really have his eyes set on the crown prince? And is the crown prince really coming to my home? Because, in this world, Wilhelm would be very famous in Sweden. Everybody would know him. And now, granted, she's met him previously one time, but never to just sit in our home and have dinner with us. It's got to be an enormous honor for Linda. And even Simon, what is Simon thinking? My God, the crown prince I don't know. I don't even know if Simon thinks of Wilhelm anymore as the crown prince. And so much as it's just his friend, his lover. I wonder. I would love to crawl inside of Simon's head and see this from his perspective. The last thing I want to talk about is, of course, the thing that we absolutely cannot overlook in this episode. It is the elephant in the room, and that is when August takes the video and publishes it online. It seems to me that throughout this episode, I think August was struggling with what to do with the information, because he didn't go and tell any of his friends, as far as we know, that, oh my God, I saw Wilhelm in bed with another young man, with Simon, this low-class, drug-dealing, alcohol-peddling commoner. He didn't do that. He didn't go to the Queen with that information. He didn't do anything with the information but sit on it. And it literally seemed to me at times in this episode that he was torn, that he did not know what he was going to do. And I don't know if it was so much, my God, he's gay. Or is it so much that he's having an affair with a commoner? Or, well, that he's in a relationship at all? I don't know. I don't know what's going through his head. But I do believe that after Wilhelm effectively emasculated him in that meeting where he took control of the secret society and told everybody in the group that August is broke, I think it was at that point hatred and humiliation and a desire at retaliation that ultimately caused him to do it. Because up to the last fraction of a second, he was hesitating with his finger over that button. And I'm just not convinced that he was completely sold on that as the best course of action. And it might have been probably was his emotions taking the better control of him, taking the course of action. And that shows what a pathetic politician he is, where Wilhelm created a situation where effectively everybody wins and used the information only in the place that it was most appropriate when he basically cut off August's manhood in front of the group. August made the poor decision of going public with the information. He would have been much wiser. His political acumen would have been much sharper had he gone maybe to Wilhelm and said, hey, I've got this tape of you and Simon, and I expect A, B, and C from you, or else I will give the video to your mother, or else I will release the video to the media. He could have used it as a means of blackmailing or extorting Wilhelm, and he didn't. So really, he loses political points there, and Wilhelm clearly comes out as the better leader, as the winner, the better politician. And so those are my thoughts on episode 5. I'm sorry that you had to wait this long for this video. I am terribly sorry about that, but I'm trying to make up for lost time. So thank you so much. Please, by all means, comment, react to the video in the comment section below, because by now you know I read all of these comments. I don't always have the time to answer every single one of them like I would like to, but I certainly do read them. So does Gus, so does Audrey, so does Justin. So please, by all means, keep them coming. And we continue to make progress on our trip to Stockholm. So if you're interested in that trip, please continue to go to our coffee website, our coffee site, our coffee page. The link is here in the description below. But we're continuing to put information there, publishing it, and it is all systems go, and we continue to make good progress. So until next time, my friends, please be safe. Please be smart. Talk to you soon. Cheers.